Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Claire Fraze, and I am an award-winning young adult author who makes videos on this channel sharing the actionable writing tips that helped me make my own writing better. And today we're going to do something fun. I have a tier ranking video prepared for you today. I am going to be ranking all of my favorite thriller tropes, or actually not my favorite, all thriller tropes that I have seen in books and movies in the past, and ranking them from my favorites to least favorites and explaining why. So I have done no preparation for this video other than create the little icons that you will see in my tier maker little grid thing on Canva. And so this is going to be really fun. I usually make videos on craft related things, so sharing different writing tips that I have found helpful in the past. So if you're interested in that, go check out my other videos. But without further ado, let's just jump into the tier ranking. So I'm going to put this up on my screen. Cool. So this is a tier maker rank thing from tiermaker.com. I put in all of my information on tiermaker.com, and they gave me this. All of the little icons at the bottom are things that I designed on Canva. It was pretty easy. Shout out to Canva. And yeah, so I'm going to be rating them based on 5 categories from literally my favorite. So if I saw this in a blurb, I would probably auto buy the book. In love it, which is I would like it if I saw it, but I wouldn't automatically buy it, but I'd still enjoy it. And then I have enjoy it, like if it's done well, I'd probably like it. I have will still read. That's like if it's done well, I guess I'll still read it. And then I have hate it, won't read, that even if it's done well, I just really dislike this trope and will not read this book. So yeah, my first, I guess we can jump right in. I'd be curious to see how you would rank all of these. I am going to leave the link to this tier maker thing in the description of this video. So go do it if you want to, and let me know if you agree or disagree with any of these in the comments. So the first trope that we have to rank is the I know what you did trope. So this is the trope where like you'd have a main character. I see this a lot in YA. Like you have a main character who has kind of a shadowy past, and you have another character at the beginning of the book come up to them and say like, I know what you did, and your past is going to catch up to you. But we as readers might not know what the character did yet, or maybe they reveal it to us after that person says that. I really enjoy this trope. I love the I know what you did because of the mystery, like the character-driven mystery that it gives you, like the mystery in the character's past, as well as the high-intensity thriller that it often leads to. So I'm trying to think of examples of an I know what you did, but I see it a lot like, or famous examples are maybe that a bunch of teenagers were involved in a car accident and they tried to cover it up and they never fessed up to it. And then maybe, there's somebody who says, I know what you did later on. Maybe it's like a ghost or something, or another person at school, or they're seeking revenge for what that person did if somebody else was killed in the car accident or something like that. So yeah, I don't know if I'd put this in literally my favorite or I love it. I think I'm going to say I love it. I would probably read a book if I saw this was the blurb of the book. I don't know if I would auto buy it. I would have to know a little bit more about the book, but I would probably be very interested. So the next one that we have is anonymous threats. So these ones are like, I don't know if anyone has read the book A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. This isn't really a spoiler, but she starts receiving threats like texts and printouts and things that are given to her, like stop snooping, like you need to stay out of this. And she has no idea where they're coming from. I find this very creepy. I would not buy a book based on this alone. I'd say that often this is a cool thing to have in conjunction with some other main plot, like if you have some sort of killer that is sending anonymous threats to something else, or to another character in the book. But I mean, also if the threats are, I think this is it. If the threats are original enough, then it might be enough to build a whole book around. So if like the threats are original or coming styled in a particular way and a character starts receiving these threats, then that might be enough to hook me into a book. But if it's just a simple like stop snooping, then that isn't really necessarily something that would turn me on to the book right away. So I'm going to put this, I think, in enjoy it. Not obsessed with it, but also not opposed to it. Okay, killer is boyfriend/girlfriend. All right. So this can go one of two ways. I feel like this is oftentimes common in like domestic thrillers. It's always the boyfriend. Like that's the stereotype, is that the killer is like always the boyfriend, or it's the scorned love interest who is going and killing the main character or something like that. So I'd say that if that's the big reveal, depending on who the characters are, it can be a little predictable, because I see that a lot and I'm a pretty avid thriller reader. So I'd say that I would still read it if that were the case, if it were done well and it was original. I think that typically that's the first person that gets investigated. And I think it was the Karen McManus book, Two Can Keep a Secret. This book that I have on my shelf. This book that had, I think it was said that, it's always the boyfriend. It's always the boyfriend that's investigated first. And the boyfriend of the girl who originally died was investigated really heavily and left town because of this big mystery. So yeah, I would say we'll still read, but it can be pretty overdone if that is the big twist at the end of the book. Unless they're like investigated in the beginning and then they go on this whole big adventure and it turns out that that character who they investigated at the beginning and maybe was helping them was really guilty this whole time. That would reverse expectations, especially if they go in saying like, it's always the boyfriend, and then it was the boyfriend even after they'd convinced themselves that it wasn't. That would be interesting. I'd like that. All right, drunk narrator. I think this can go a couple of ways. This one really depends on execution, because I don't really like reading books about really inconsistent and sloppy narration. And it's one thing if it's inconsistent because the character is lying or trying to cover something up. It's another thing if they are just lying because they're forgetful, because that doesn't really make them a very likable narrator. So, I'd say I will still read it depending on, and also, all right, it also depends whether the character is drunk the whole time. But I've never read a book where the character is drunk the whole time. So maybe I'll say enjoy it. Because if you have certain scenes where the character is drunk and certain scenes where the character is not drunk, then that can be interesting because there's a little bit of everything. And like maybe if there was an important moment and the character was drunk in the important moment, they might be a little bit of an unreliable narrator in that moment and misremember certain things. So I think it can be done well and in an interesting way. So yeah, I'll put it under enjoy it. Okay, domestic violence. Oh gosh. I feel like bad for saying that I like reading books where this is a big part of the thriller plot, just because I'm really fascinated by books and thrillers that dive into the horrible things that people do to each other. And this is such a dark and prevalent source of horror in everyday life that I actually do enjoy reading books about this. I feel like, I don't enjoy reading about it. Like, it doesn't make me feel good by any means, but it's fascinating to me how people are able to navigate that situation. And just, it's so heartbreaking and sad in so many cases. And the main character of my series is a victim of domestic violence, and it's really, really horrible. And stuff that her dad does to her is just awful. And I'd say, because this is a real life horror, okay, I'm separating this. This is me reading about this in a thriller book. Like if the twist has something to do with that, or if it's prevalent in the thriller in some way, I do enjoy it. I do enjoy reading about that. This is not me endorsing the act itself. And I will say that for all of the different tropes on this list. I mean, these are thriller tropes. I'm only ranking them from an audience enjoyment. And this is not enjoyment like, oh, I love watching it in a happy way. It's enjoyment like in a, oh, this is scary and giving me all the thrilling feelings that I want while reading a thriller. And that's why I am enjoying it. So yeah, I will put it there. It might even be able to be bumped up, but yeah, we'll see. I might bump it up because that is one of the tropes that really fascinates me in thrillers. Okay, so moving on to One of Us is Guilty. I love this trope. This is This is going to turn into a big Karen McManus pitch. One of us is lying. That's basically the main hook of this book, is like one of the main narrators of this story. It's like which one of them is lying and try to figure it out. So that is the reason that I picked up that book. I really loved that book. I'm not going to spoil any of the plot or the ending for you, but I'm going to put this in literally my fave. If a book is pitched like this, then I will definitely pick it up. Yeah, 100%. All right, how are you going to get away with it? This is also one of my favorites. I don't want to spoil this movie, but there is a movie, if anybody who's watching knows what I'm talking about, there is a movie that does this really well. The first half starts out as like a traditional murder mystery, and then halfway through you figure out who actually did it, and then the second half turns into a how are they going to get away with it, and you want the character to get away with it because the character is so likable. So I love it when it's pulled off well. Obviously, if like the character murdered another character in cold blood and they wanted to get away with it, like that would not be as compelling. But if it's like an honest mistake, or it's just a really, really likable character who did something wrong and something bad happened, or it was an accident and it doesn't look like an accident, like then you want the character to get away with it because you don't want them to face the consequences for this horrible thing because they aren't really in the wrong, if that makes any sense. So I really like those where like the cops and the detectives in the world become the villains is really compelling. Instead of like, it's law enforcement trying to hunt down a serial killer. It's like them trying to get away from law enforcement. I'm also doing that in the book I'm writing right now, and it's really fun. All right, so Mysterious Stranger. Okay, so I think this can be done well. I think this can be boring. It depends on your stranger. It depends on the story. I don't have any really strong feelings about Mysterious Stranger. So I think I'm going to probably put Mysterious Stranger in will still read if done well. Because it depends what the stranger, like why the stranger is there, what the stranger is doing. If it's like a stranger has appeared in town and nobody knows who they are, that's interesting and intriguing, but it typically has to coincide with something creepy happening. Like they just happen to be in town right after someone has been found dead or something like that. Like that will make the Mysterious Stranger more interesting. So I'll still read it. Unreliable narrator. I love unreliable narrators. They are my favorite. And I'm differentiating unreliable narrator with drunk narrator because unreliable narrator, you can get things like Gone Girl and creepy twists on like characters you think you can trust and you turn out not being able to trust them. It's great. It's so good. When it's done well, unreliable narrators are really hard to write because if they're done poorly, the readers can feel cheated and like they were lied to, and that's not what you want your readers to feel like. So only when it's done well do I like an unreliable narrator. Like in Gone Girl. I love an unreliable narrator in Gone Girl. So guilty main character. This is hard because you can't really auto-buy a book knowing that the main character is guilty. Like, I'm not going to like auto-buy a book because they never say that on the blurb. But if this was the main twist, I haven't seen this in a thriller recently, but I would love to see more guilty main characters. And these also kind of go hand in hand with unreliable narrators and also with the how are you going to get away with it? And also potentially with one of us is guilty. I'm seeing a theme emerging here. I think that guilty main characters are really interesting to read about. And because you really get to get into their heads. And I haven't seen a lot of guilty main characters where like the main character is the one committing the murders and they're like a creepy person. But a lot of like accidents and it goes in hand with the how are you going to get away with it. So yeah, I like me a guilty main character. So, okay, Letter from the Dead. Nah. It's not my thing. Yeah. Hate it's a little strong. But if I saw this on the back of a book, I'd probably be like, I probably wouldn't read it. I think because it would rely, not that I don't like ghosts, but I don't know. I guess by Letter from the Dead, I'm imagining like a historical era letter that like comes in written in calligraphy. if they start getting like emails from their dead counterpart, that might be more interesting, just because it's a little more contemporary to me. I guess I'd still read it. Yeah, I'll still read it. Okay. But it would have to be a little bit more contemporary for me to be into it. And it would also, like, the letter couldn't just, like, the main hook couldn't just be that the letter is from a dead person. They would have to, like, be threatening the main character or have discovered something or need something, and that would be the trigger for the plot. That could be interesting. So I guess I'd still read it depending on how it was executed. All right, POV detective. I'm just going to come right out and say it. I don't really like POV detective books. I don't really read them. I primarily read teen and young adult thrillers. That's my main love. So you don't get a lot of POV detectives because you don't get a lot of teenage detectives. You get like a lot of teenage amateur detectives who try to go and dive into cases in between periods, but not a lot of like actual working detectives. So not really into that. I've never really been into that. So won't read. All right, rich people. So here's the thing. I listened to a podcast episode given by a woman whose name I can't remember through the Romance Writers of America. It was called Writing for Your Id. And in that podcast, or I guess it wasn't really a podcast, it was like a recording of a talk. She talked about how humans all have certain things that they gravitate towards in fiction. And if you are able to hit all of these buttons in your story, you will appeal to people on a psychological level where they will like be more gravitated toward your story and not necessarily even understand why. So examples of these buttons are things like competition, danger, power, and one of these, touch was another big one. Beauty was a big one. And one of them was also wealth. So I think people really like reading and consuming media where like things are beautiful and like there is lavish, expensive things in it. So like, in The Great Gatsby, you've got beautiful scenery and props and houses and descriptions of things. And there's something like appealing and escapist and exciting about reading about all those, like that extreme wealth. And I think that that is pretty common in a lot of stories. Like you always, like you can get the rich private school girl with the big house and like in YA, and that's where the murder occurs and you have that. So it's not that I'm not into that, because I think, I'm human too. It's exciting to read about these. Like I loved reading The Great Gatsby and reading about all the different clothes and the settings and everything. So I think that it's a good trope. I don't think I could base an entire book around it. Or also like examples of like in Knives Out, you have the really like wealthy family and it's the wealthy guy that dies and it's a really wealthy like house. Or I mean, it's not a wealthy house. The house doesn't have money, but the house is a product of a wealth, or it probably cost a lot of money and it's beautiful and huge and expensive looking. So I think that it can add to a story. So I think I will probably put it as enjoy it, because I think that it can enhance a plot if you put it in a really cool setting like that, but it isn't a setting in and of it, or it isn't a plot or story in and of itself. So yeah, like I think Knives Out would have been a different story had it taken place in like a rural town somewhere in middle America and like in a much smaller house, and it wasn't, the old wealthy baron with all of his like people that wanted to inherit his fortune. Well, maybe I'll move it up a little. I like a nice gorgeous old house. Also, when you have a haunted house, having a really beautiful old house adds to the ghost thing, in my opinion. All right, so small town secrets. I love small town secrets. I love plots like what's it called? I'm trying to remember the name of the Stepford Wives, when she moves to the town and something is not quite right about the town. I love that. Or like in Big Little Lies. Love Big Little Lies. So I'm gonna say, yeah, I love a small town with secrets. Like when you move to a new place and something is just deeply unsettling or wrong, that is one of my favorite tropes. It's my jam. I love it. All right, woman can't have baby. I think that's like Rosemary's Baby. I think it's common in like The Fifth Child or stories like that. It's never really been a huge draw of mine in fiction. I won't like pick up a book and be like, oh, she can't have a baby, I'm gonna read it. So, but I don't hate it. I guess I'll still read it if it's pulled off in a good way. Like if it's a compelling plot. I don't really have anything against it. Gossip blog? Nah, I don't really like Gossip blog. Like I did watch Gossip Girl, but mostly because of like the New York City, like they have cool, like they go to a cool school and they have like crazy lives, but it wasn't because of the Gossip blog. And all of the stories in YA that I've read about Gossip blogs and like how they're like thrillers haven't really done it for me. Like One of Us is Lying has a Gossip blog in it, and it's not that, like that was the part that didn't really appeal to me. So I'm gonna say hate it. I won't read it. If it's a book and I read the back cover of the book and it's about a gossip blog and somehow a thriller about that, I'm not going to pick up the book. So if it's in another book that has a lot of other stuff going on, then I guess I'll read it, but it's not a draw for me at all. All right, Return to Hometown. This one makes me think of Sharp Objects. I really liked this. I like it when it's a really traumatized character having to come home and confront all of their past traumas. That I'm a huge fan of that. I don't know if I want to put it in my favorite or if I love it. I think it depends. It depends how it's executed. I'm going to put it in love it because there is the condition that like they have to be deeply traumatized and they have to have like some sort of secret in their past. Like maybe they return to the hometown and it's an I know what you did situation. And that is somehow, that the past is going to catch up to the main character. I like that stuff. That stuff is creepy. Oh, moving on to my least favorite trope, affair with someone older. This is so common in YA. I feel like in most young adult thrillers, there's a character that was having an affair with an older gentleman, and it is very common, and it doesn't really get me anymore because I just have come to expect it. So I am going to put this in hate it won't read. It is one of the most aggravating tropes to me as a avid reader of young adult fiction. I understand why, because it is a very scandalous thing for a teenager to do, and a lot of teenagers go to school, and like the authority figures in schools are teachers and all that stuff, but it's done so much that it doesn't feel exciting or like, ooh, that's a great twist to me anymore. So yeah, not really my thing. But cults are also not really my thing. I guess I'll still read it if it's done well and if it's interesting, and depending on what the cult is. But yeah, thriller and horror stories about cults have never really been my favorite, and they're pretty common. So if it's done well, if it's a little more original, then I'm all over it. But yeah, if I know it's about a cult, I probably won't read it or pick it up at the bookstore. Okay, Close Quarters or Murder Among Us. Ooh. I like this, like when it depending on the setting, I think this is cool. I'd say I enjoy it. I like like as long as they're trapped in the setting and there's someone among them that is the killer. I don't like it as much as One of Us is Guilty because I like the POV thing. Like you have to write from the POV of a guilty person. So I think that is more fun than Murder Among Us. But I guess One of Us is Guilty and Murder Among Us can also be the same thing. Like they could be a closed quarters. One of Us is Guilty. So yeah, I'll enjoy it. But it's also, there have been a lot of iterations of the closed quarters thriller. So I think, the isolation trope, I think, is another way of phrasing that. And I think it's pretty common. So as long as it was an interesting new iteration of the isolation trope, I would totally read it. All right, Amnesia. I have an itchy nose for some reason. Please excuse me while I itch my nose. I don't know. Amnesia? I never really liked Amnesia romance. I think Amnesia thrillers are similarly not incredibly exciting to me. I guess I'll still read it, but it wouldn't be my favorite. Like, I wouldn't not read it if I saw that it was an amnesia thriller. Like someone wakes up and they don't know what happened or don't know what happened that night and someone was killed and they have to search around for their memories. I've read a lot of books like that before, and it's not as exciting to me as it used to be. So yeah, I think I might pass on the amnesia thing, but I'd still read it if it was original. Diary entries, nah. I've never really been a big diary entries fan in books. I did really love the book Love, Rosie. I thought that was a really great diary entries found text book, and it was just so cute, and it really worked. But with thrillers, I've never been a huge fan of diary entries. If it's done well, then it's done well, but I probably wouldn't pick it up. If I was like filtering through and it was only diary entries and no prose at all, I probably wouldn't pick it up. Missing Child. Anyone who's read They Stay knows that I love missing kid trope stories. As long as like the reason for the kid going missing is really new. Or, yeah, I mean, all of this comes down to originality. Any of these tropes can be done really well or really poorly depending on how you approach them. But I really like missing kid tropes. Like I read the summary of a book the other day where it's like a woman finds her daughter who went missing a long time ago and something is different and like there's just something off about the whole situation. That's really creepy. Or like with my book, what I did is like I had the kid go missing and then it was for a really crazy reason and I had to rescue him before it was too late. So I think, you can do some cool things with the missing kid trope. Bad friends. Aren't most friends bad? No, I'm not gonna. No, I'm recording this all in one take. Otherwise, I go back and X that out. No, friends are great. We love friends, but I feel like most friends in thrillers are probably not very good friends. So this also depends how it is pulled off. Maybe I'll say, I think I'll still read it. If it's like the friends that betrayed the people, or like the people and the friends aren't who you thought they were, then I'll still read it. Yeah. Yeah, I think like bullying and bad friend groups is a big common theme in YA too. I see that a lot. And there are times that it can be really, really effective, especially when it's like bad friends and you are all involved in some sort of creepy plot together. And then your friends start backstabbing you and stuff. That can actually, that can actually be pretty cool. So I'll put it there. Poisoned. I am a sucker for good poisoning in a thriller. Like when they are poisoned through a very specific, unique way, I'm a fan. I'll say love it. I've been watching Killing Eve on Hulu recently, and there are so many different creative murders that happen in that show, just completely out of the box crazy, that I have been enjoying watching. So if you haven't seen that show, I'd recommend checking it out. There is definitely some poison in there, and I've been digging it. So yeah, it's as long as it's unique, and it has to be like a specific real life poison if you were writing a contemporary thriller that could actually kill somebody, not just a fake poison. The whodunit. I think this is, well, no, the whodunit is different than how are you going to get away with it, because the whodunit is you know exactly who did it. You just have to figure out the reason. I feel like this can get boring. Yeah, I guess I enjoy it. If it's pulled off really well, then I'd probably like it a little more. But I feel like most of my excitement from reading thrillers comes from the quest to figure out who did the thing. And if I already know who did the thing at the beginning, then I probably wouldn't be as interested in reading the rest of the thriller. Unless I guess it's you know who did it, but they were part of a much larger plot and that person is going to do it again. That's a different story. But it's not my favorite trope. Okay. Cheating on the spouse is a big one in domestic thrillers. I really don't like this trope. Yeah. I mean, it's fine. It's just common too. It's kind of like the affair with someone older, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. It's not my favorite. It's not my favorite twist, but it's also common in domestic thrillers. So I'm trying to remember which is the other one that was really common in domestic thrillers that I am for. Oh, the killer's boyfriend and girlfriend. Yeah. So this is just a personal thing. I'm sure that it can be well done. I feel like domestic thrillers are also tricky to come up with super original plots. For at least all the ones that I've read, most of the twists have something to do with infidelity or multiple partners or domestic violence and things like that. So I am sure that there's a cool way to do it. I haven't seen one in a while that hasn't had some form of infidelity in it. So yeah. And our final trope to rank this afternoon is the mental illness twist, which I think can be done very well. I think I really like this as long as it's not a cop out. Like you can't just say like, oh, he was, XYZ fake diagnosis here. As long as you build up a character who's very clearly like either a psychopath or a sociopath or a character who has like a behavioral disorder that you've done a lot of research on and are portraying accurately, or I really like it when like the serial killer is revealed to have like, maybe a brain injury or something that explains why they act the way that they do, or some sort of reason, and that could be a cool mental illness twist that comes in. Like if they were in a car accident when they were a kid and that was caused by something, and then they end up, that damages their frontal lobe and they're like, they become a little more impulsive and then maybe they start killing people. I don't know, but like some sort of twist that explains their behavior can be cool. I don't like mental illness twists when it feels like it's a cop out, when it's like, oh yeah, this person who's been acting totally normal for the entire book was actually a secret psychopath this whole time, but you would have no idea because they acted totally normal. There have to be tells, and there has to be a strong foundation if you're going to make this twist, which makes it hard to make the twist because you have to make the character subtle enough that it actually fools the readers. You can't be too heavy-handed or they might catch on to it. But there is a very, very good character. I'm not going to name the character, but in Sharp Objects, this is done really well on multiple occasions. And those twists just exploded my brain. They were so good. So if you want to learn how to write a good mental illness twist, I highly recommend reading Sharp Objects and also watching the show, because the show is really good, and paying attention particularly to two characters who I will not name in fear of spoilers, because there are two twists like this in that series, or in that TV series and in the book, and they're very, very well done. All right. So that is, I guess, my chart. I feel like that's pretty balanced. I don't have any, I'm pretty generous with my favorites and love-its. I have a lot of those. I have more favorites and love-its than I do will still reads and hate it won't reads. But yeah, I feel pretty good about that. All of these, like the domestic violence, the mental illness twist, like these all have to be portrayed in a realistic way that's grounded in reality and respectful and researched, that isn't gratuitous and isn't throwing it in there just for the sake of having it in there. Otherwise, I really find it gross and like a cop-out, and it's not a good thing to be portraying these heavy topics without being cognizant of the effects that it can have on readers and the narratives that you are putting forward. So if you are going to tackle any of these, be smart, do your research, be respectful, don't be gratuitous in your writing, and don't glorify, God, please don't glorify any of these horrible things. But I'm curious to hear what your opinions are on all the tropes that I ranked today in this video. Do you agree with my thoughts? Do you disagree with any of these? Where would you have ranked all of these different tropes? And if you are interested, go to the description of this video and try it for yourself. I'll have a link to this tier maker in the description. I had a lot of fun filming this, so I'm sure that you would have fun playing around with your tier rankings as well. So thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like it and also subscribe to my channel. I make more videos about craft things and writing tips and behind the scenes looks at my writing process. So like, subscribe. I hope you have a fantastic week. And as always, happy writing.